Hello, and welcome to the quiet journey tonight. We drift far from the relentless hum of the modern world, beyond the reach of its urgent demands and fleeting distractions. Saddle in, let your shoulders drop, and feel the weight of the day begin to lift. We are traveling to a time when thought was forged in solitude, when the grandest questions were wrestled with beneath silent stars. I am always curious where in the world, and at what time you are joining me for this quiet exploration. Perhaps you are winding down after a long day, or finding a moment of peace in the hush of the early morning. Wherever you are, I hope these words offer a gentle passage into tranquility, a soft landing for your mind as we journey into the life and landscapes that shaped one of history's most profound thinkers. Tonight, we follow the path of a philosopher whose words still echo with a startling clarity, a man who sought to understand the very pulse of existence, and whose journey took him to the highest peaks of human thought and the deepest valleys of human experience. Let us begin our slow descent into stillness, into the cool embrace of a winter night in the mountains. The air itself hums with a profound, almost ancient silence. It is a silence woven from the slow, deliberate melting of ice, the soft sighs of snow relinquishing its grip on the high peaks of the Engadin Valley. Here, in the heart of the Swiss Alps, winter makes its slow, dignified retreat, leaving behind a crispness that cleanses the very breath. Imagine the subtle drip, drip, drip of water from eaves, from the branches of ancient larch trees, each drop a tiny chime in the vast, still cathedral of the mountains. The ground, still firm with frost in the shadowed places, yields to the tentative warmth in others, revealing patches of dark, moist earth, smelling faintly of pine needles and damp stone. We arrive in Sils Maria, a small village nestled by the shimmering expanse of Lake Silvaplana, a place that held a peculiar enchantment for a solitary wanderer in his later years. It is late, deep into the night. The moon, a cool, luminous disk, hangs suspended in a sky of such inky, profound blue that it seems to absorb all sound, all light save its own silver offering. Its glow spills across the frozen, then thawing surface of the lake, transforming the vast sheet of ice into a polished mirror, reflecting the distant stars as tiny, shivering points of light. The edges of the lake, where the ice meets the shore, whisper with soft, almost inaudible creaks and groans, the gentle shift of elemental forces at play. The village itself is asleep, a cluster of dark shapes against the pale snow. Only a few windows offer a faint, warm square of light, like distant hearths burning low. One such light emanates from a small, unassuming room, its glow a soft beacon in the overwhelming darkness. Inside, the air is thick with the scent of burning wood, a fireplace casting dancing shadows on rough, hewn walls. The flames crackle and sigh, a rhythmic comforting sound that counters the immense silence pressing in from outside. It's a sound that invites introspection, a gentle companion to the turning of thoughts. Here in this sanctuary of quietude, we find him, not arguing, not debating, not caught in the clamor of the world, but a lonely figure, a silhouette against the firelight, or perhaps illuminated by a single lamp on a simple wooden table. His hands perhaps are clasped, or he is gently turning the pages of a worn notebook. The thoughts that occupy this mind are not those of daily strife or petty grievances. No, they are thoughts of immense scale, of eternity, of the cyclical nature of existence, of the profound, often challenging, meaning of life itself. He is not seeking answers in the external world, but rather sifting through the depths of his own being, meticulously arranging the intricate patterns of his reflections. The cold outside, the deep, pervasive chill of the high mountain night, seems to penetrate the very bones of the listener, yet it is a refreshing, cleansing cold. It is a cold that quiets the frantic hum of the mind, that stills the restless currents of daily worry. Imagine the Christmas filling your lungs, cool and pure, as if each breath is washing away the dust of urban life. The silence, too, is not an absence, but a presence, a profound resonant stillness that allows the faint echoes of your own inner landscape to emerge. The clock in the village tower strikes midnight, each chime a deep, resonant vibration that travels through the cold air, lingering for a long, slow moment before dissolving into the vast quiet. 1, 2, 3. Up to 12, each note a gentle reminder of the passage of time. Yet here, time itself feels suspended, stretched thin and luminous under the gaze of the ancient stars. The deep blue of the night sky, so dark it appears almost velvet, is studded with countless pinpricks of light, each a distant sun, a silent witness to the solitary vigil. The air, thin and clear at this altitude, sharpens the senses, allowing for a heightened awareness of the subtle textures of existence. The rough wool of a blanket, the smooth surface of polished wood, the faint scent of old paper and ink sooty. All these details emerge with a quiet clarity. This is a place where the soul can breathe, where the mind can cool and settle, drifting into a state of clear, unburdened meditation, suspended between the vastness of the cosmos and the intimate glow of a solitary lamp. The world outside, with its noise and its rush, seems impossibly distant, a fading memory. Here, in Sils Maria, under the watchful eye of the moon and the ancient mountains, there is only the quiet turning of thought, the soft glow of the fire, and the profound, enduring peace of the deep winter night. Now, let us turn the pages of time gently, as one might turn the brittle leaves of an ancient manuscript, and journey backward, far from the icy peaks of the Alps, to a small, unassuming village in the heart of Saxony. Imagine a landscape of rolling hills, of quiet fields stretching toward a horizon dotted with sturdy, dark forests. The air here carries the scent of rich earth, of blooming wildflowers in summer, and the damp, earthy smell of autumn leaves. This is Reckon, a place of profound stillness, where life moved to the slow, steady rhythm of the seasons and the church bells. Here, in the mid-negative 19th century, a small parsonage stood, a modest home built of solid stone, its windows looking out onto a small, carefully tended garden. This was the world of a young boy named Friedrich, a world steeped in the quiet dignity of a rural pastor's family. The house itself seemed to breathe with a gentle reverence, filled with the hushed rustle of pages, the soft glow of lamplight on dark wood, and the subtle scent of old paper and beeswax polish. At the heart of this world stood the ancient stone church, its spire reaching toward the often gray, often blue Saxon sky. Its walls, thick and cool to the touch, had absorbed centuries of prayers, of hymns sung in solemn tones, of whispered confessions, and the rustle of Sunday best. Inside, the light was always soft, filtered through tall, narrow windows, casting long, shifting shadows across the worn flagstones of the aisle. The air was cool, carrying a faint, sweet smell of incense and old wood, a scent that spoke of permanence and tradition. And within this sacred space, a sound that would echo through the boy's earliest memories, the deep, resonant voice of the church organ. His father, Ludwig, the gentle and scholarly pastor, would often sit at the console, his fingers moving with a practiced grace across the keys, coaxing forth harmonies that filled every corner of the vast space. The organ music was not merely sound. It was a presence, a living, breathing entity that swelled and receded, filling the air with waves of profound solemnity and quiet joy. Imagine the low, sustained bass notes, vibrating through the very floorboards, a comforting hum that seemed to resonate deep within the chest. Then the higher, reedy voices would join, weaving intricate patterns, like threads of golden light in the cool, dim air. Each chord would hang in the air for a long, slow moment, dissolving gradually, leaving behind a profound sense of peace and stillness. Young Friedrich, often called the little pastor by those around him, would observe this world with an unusual intensity. He was a quiet child, often found in the shadows of his father's study, a room lined with heavy leather, bound books, their spines a rich tapestry of dark reds, browns, and greens. The light in the study was always subdued, filtering through small panes of glass, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the air. He wouldn't be playing boisterously, but rather watching, listening, absorbing the subtle nuances of the world around him. Perhaps he sat on a low stool, tracing the patterns on an old Persian rug, or simply gazing at the steady flame of a candle lost in thought. The thick, heavy pages of the family Bible, with its ornate script and illustrations, were a constant presence. Its weight in his small hands, the rustle of its delicate paper, the very smell of its aged leather binding, all contributed to an atmosphere of deep reverence and intellectual curiosity. This was a home where words held power, where ideas were discussed with calm deliberation, and where the rhythm of life was dictated not by urgency, but by the quiet unfolding of thought and faith. The tranquility of this childhood was not merely an absence of noise. It was a profound, enveloping presence. It was the security of a world where everything had its place, where ancient rituals provided comfort, and where the grand narratives of faith offered a framework for understanding existence. The sound of the organ in particular was a lullaby of structure and order, a musical embrace that surrounded him, offering a deep sense of belonging. It was a sound that spoke of the eternal, of something vast and unchanging, a gentle counterpoint to the fleeting nature of daily life. This was a time before the storms, before the challenging questions, before the solitary wanderings. This was a time of safety, of being wrapped in the warm, resonant tones of his father's music, and the quiet, steady presence of countless books. The world outside the parsonage walls, with its fields and its forests, seemed to hold its breath, watching over the small, contemplative boy. And as the last echoes of the organ music fade, imagine yourself enveloped in that same ancient, sacred calm, a deep and undisturbed peace settling over your mind, like the soft golden light of a setting sun over the quiet fields of Ricken. From the gentle, nurturing quiet of Ricken, our journey now leads us to a new kind of stillness, one imbued with ancient echoes and the disciplined rhythm of scholarly life. We travel to Schulpter, a renowned boarding school not far from the city of Naumburg. This is no ordinary school. It is a venerable institution, housed within the formidable walls of a former Cistercian monastery, a place where centuries of contemplation and learning have seeped into the very stone. Imagine arriving at this place, its ancient, weathered facades rising starkly from the surrounding landscape. The air here carries a different kind of scent fruity, not just of earth and fields, but of old stone, of polished wood, and the faint, unmistakable aroma of countless books. The mornings at Forter began with a bracing, almost ritualistic chill. The washing water, drawn from deep wells, was always cold, a shock to the system that served to sharpen the senses, to bring one fully into the present moment. The splash and trickle of this icy water, followed by the brisk rub of rough linen, was a daily awakening, a quiet preparation for the day's intellectual demands. Then, as the first pale light of dawn crept through the high, arched windows, came the sound that defined the early hours, the sonorous recitation of ancient Latin. Voices, young and earnest, would fill the cool, stone-lined classrooms, struggling with the complexities of Cicero or Virgil, their words echoing softly against the high ceilings. It was a language of gravitas, of precise structure and profound thought, a gateway to a world long past, yet vibrantly alive within these walls. The rhythm of these recitations, the rolling R's and the hard C's, the measured cadence of classical verse, created a hypnotic backdrop to the morning's awakening, a sound that was both challenging and deeply comforting in its timelessness. Young Friedrich, now a student among many, found his rhythm within these ancient structures. He would walk the long, cool corridors, his footsteps falling with a steady, measured cadence on the worn flagstones. Each step produced a soft, resonant echo, a private rhythm that accompanied his thoughts. These corridors, with their high-vaulted ceilings and deep-set windows, were more than mere passages. They were pathways for the mind, silent witnesses to countless hours of study and contemplation. The light filtering through the windows would often create long, shifting patterns of shadow and illumination on the stone floors, guiding his solitary rambles. It was within these walls that his mind began to truly unfurl, like the delicate fronds of a fern seeking light in the quiet undergrowth of a forest. Here, he was immersed in the grand narratives of ancient Greece, the heroic epics of Homer, with their tales of gods and mortals, of courage and fate, filled his imagination. He encountered the profound tragedies of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, delving into the depths of human suffering, ambition, and the inexorable hand of destiny. These were not mere stories. They were profound explorations of the human condition, presented with a stark beauty and an unflinching gaze. Imagine him seated in the quiet of the library, the air thick with the scent of aged paper, leather, and dust motes dancing in the shafts of sunlight. His fingers would trace the delicate script in a well-worn volume, his eyes absorbing the elegant curves of Greek letters. He would lose himself in the struggles of Achilles, the wisdom of Odysseus, the tragic fate of Oedipus. The weight of these ancient texts in his hands, the rustle of their brittle pages, the very texture of the knowledge they contained, all contributed to a deep sensory experience of learning. His thoughts, once confined to the gentle religious teachings of his childhood, now began to stretch and expand, quietly breaking through the soil of convention. He was learning to question, to analyze, to appreciate the intricate beauty of classical thought, the profound ideas of the ancients, their relentless pursuit of wisdom and understanding, resonated deeply within him, stirring a nascent philosophical restlessness. The classical long corridors of Forter, with their echoing stone and their silent witness to centuries of learning, became a physical manifestation of this intellectual journey. Each step on the worn flagstones was a step deeper into the vast, luminous world of antiquity. The heavy doors, the cool, silent cloisters, the distant sounds of other students murmuring Latin phrases. All these elements contributed to an atmosphere of deep, unwavering concentration. This was a time of quiet immersion, of intellectual blossoming. The beauty he found in Greek tragedy was not a beauty of simple happiness, but a profound aesthetic appreciation for the grandeur of human struggle, for the acceptance of fate. It was a beauty that carried the weight of ages, a sense of deep, resonant meaning that settled into the very core of his being. As we imagine him walking these ancient pathways, let the subtle scent of old books and the gentle echo of his footsteps guide your mind into a similar state of quiet contemplation, a slow, unhurried journey through the profound beauty of classical knowledge, allowing your thoughts to drift and expand in this deeply peaceful, scholarly embrace. The world outside these walls fades, leaving only the soft murmur of ancient wisdom and the steady rhythm of a mind awakening. The city of Leipzig, in the autumn of 1865, was a place of muted grays and persistent dampness. Rain, a fine, ceaseless drizzle, often blurred the edges of the narrow streets and softened the sharp lines of the Baroque architecture. It was a city of ancient universities and bustling bookshops, where the scent of old paper and leather mingled with the damp earth and the distant smoke from chimneys. For a young man like Friedrich, newly arrived, the city held a quiet promise, a vast library of unspoken thoughts waiting to be discovered. One particular afternoon, the rain had settled into a steady, hypnotic rhythm against the tall windows of a small, unpretentious second-hand bookshop. Inside, the air was thick with the comforting aroma of aged pages and forgotten stories. Dust motes danced in the slivers of weak light that managed to penetrate the perpetual gloom, illuminating rows upon rows of leather, bound volumes, their spines worn smooth by countless hands and years. Friedrich, then a student of philology, moved slowly through the narrow aisles, his footsteps muffled by the thick rugs, his gaze lingering on titles that promised ancient wisdom or forgotten verse. He was not searching for anything specific, merely allowing the quiet currents of the shop to guide him, a silent wanderer in a labyrinth of knowledge. His fingers, slender and quick, brushed against a particularly dense volume tucked away on a lower shelf, almost hidden behind a stack of more popular works. It was bound in a dark, unassuming leather, slightly scuffed with no grand title emblazoned in gold. A simple, almost austere presence. He drew it out, the weight of it substantial in his hands, a tangible heft that spoke of deep thought and serious intent. The title, in modest lettering, read, Die Welt alles Will, Unvorstellung, The World as Will and Representation. Arthur Schopenhauer. The name was vaguely familiar, a murmur from the periphery of his academic world, but nothing more. He carried the book to a small rickety table near a window, where the persistent drumming of the rain was most audible. The sound was a soft, rhythmic lullaby, a backdrop against which the world outside seemed to recede, leaving only the quiet intimacy of the room. He opened the volume, the pages crisp, almost brittle with age, emitting a faint, sweet scent of dried ink and forgotten time. His eyes fell upon the opening lines, and a stillness descended upon him, deeper than the quiet of the shop, more profound than the rain's gentle insistence. It was not merely reading, it was an encounter. The words on the page, stark and unflinching, seemed to cut through the familiar fabric of his understanding, revealing a landscape he had sensed but never truly seen. Schopenhauer spoke of a blind, striving will, and ceaseless, irrational force driving all existence, and of the world as merely its representation, a fleeting, illusory image. It was a vision both terrifying and strangely liberating. The comfortable certainties he had absorbed from his pious upbringing, the neat categories of Enlightenment philosophy, began to dissolve like sugar in hot tea. He read on, oblivious to the passage of time, to the deepening gloom outside as afternoon gave way to twilight. The rain continued its steady patter, a constant comforting companion to the storm brewing within his mind. Each sentence was a hammer blow, not against him, but against the complacent assumptions of his age. He felt a cold, exhilarating shock, a sudden, blinding flash of insight in the darkness. It was as if a veil had been torn away, not to reveal a horrifying void, but a profound, unvarnished truth about the nature of suffering and the relentless current of life. The shopkeeper, a quiet man with spectacles perched on his nose, eventually stirred, moving through the aisles to light the gas lamps. Their soft, yellowish glow cast long, wavering shadows across the bookshelves, transforming the familiar space into something more mysterious, more ancient. Friedrich, still immersed, barely noticed. His mind was alight, not with the warmth of a comforting fire, but with the cool, austere brilliance of a distant star. This was not a philosophy that offered solace in the traditional sense. It offered a different kind of peace, a stoic acceptance, a clear-eyed gaze into the abyss without flinching. It was a philosophy that acknowledged the pervasive presence of pain, not as an aberration, but as an intrinsic part of the world's fabric. And in that recognition there was a strange, unsettling freedom. To understand the root of suffering was, in a way, to disarm it. He closed the book eventually, the sound of the leather cover meeting the pages a soft, resonant thud in the quiet room. The rain outside had softened to a mere whisper. He felt lighter, yet more grounded, as if a great weight had been lifted, replaced by a new, more profound understanding. The world had not changed, but his way of seeing it had. He had found a language for the inchoate stirrings within his own soul, a framework for the questions that had always haunted him. The cool, damp air of Leipzig now felt less oppressive, more invigorating. He had learned, in the quiet solitude of that rainy afternoon, to look at life's pain not with despair, but with a gaze of calm, almost detached, understanding. The journey into the depths of thought had begun, guided by the somber wisdom of a distant, uncompromising voice. The air around Lake Lucerne and the gentle embrace of the Swiss Alps carried a different quality. It was crisp and clean, scented with pine and the cool dampness of the vast body of water. Here, in the idyllic setting of Tripschen, a villa nestled on a peninsula, away from the dust and clamor of cities, Friedrich found a haven. It was the autumn of 1868 when he first met Richard Wagner, the colossal figure of German music, and a new chapter, vibrant and intensely personal, began to unfold. The Tripschen villa itself was a place of quiet elegance, its rooms filled with the soft glow of lamplight and the rich resonant tones of a grand piano. Outside, the garden sloped gently down to the lake's edge, where small waves lapped rhythmically against the shore, a perpetual, soothing murmur. In the distance, the majestic peaks of the Alps, often capped with pristine snow, stood guard, their silent grandeur a constant reminder of enduring beauty and timeless scale. Friedrich, then a young professor of classical philology, found himself drawn into the magnetic orbit of Wagner's household. It was a world shaped by art, by profound discussions, and by the shared conviction that a new cultural epoch was dawning, one that would revive the spirit of ancient Greece through the power of music and myth. The days at Tribschen flowed with an almost dreamlike cadence. Mornings might begin with a quiet breakfast, the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the cool morning air. Then, hours would be spent in the study, surrounded by books, by the quiet rustle of turning pages, or by the scratching of pens on paper. But the true heart of Tribschen was the music. Wagner, in his creative fervor, would often sit at the piano, his powerful hands coaxing forth torrents of sound, fragments of new operas, or familiar melodies performed with an intensity that seemed to vibrate through the very walls of the villa. Friedrich would listen, mesmerized, lost in the intricate tapestries of sound, feeling the deep resonance of the music within his own being. The piano's sustained chords, the delicate arpeggios, the surging crescendos, each note seemed to speak directly to his soul, echoing the philosophical currents that swirled in his mind. Evenings were often spent in animated conversation, sometimes late into the night, around a crackling fire in the drawing room, or perhaps by the soft light of oil lamps. Wagner, his wife Cosima, and Friedrich would delve into the deepest questions of art, philosophy, and the destiny of German culture. The air would be thick with ideas, with passionate declarations and thoughtful silences. Friedrich, usually reserved, found himself opening up, his own nascent theories on tragedy and the Dionysian spirit finding a sympathetic and stimulating audience. They would walk together, too, along the gravel paths that wound through the garden, leading down to the lake. As dusk painted the sky in hues of orange and violet, their figures, silhouetted against the shimmering water, would move with a measured pace. The sound of their footsteps, a soft crunching on the gravel, was often the only disturbance to the quiet evening. The conversations on these walks were often less formal, more intimate, a true communion of minds. They spoke of Greek myths, of Beethoven's symphonies, of the power of drama to transform human experience. The gentle lapping of the lake's waves against the shore provided a constant, calming rhythm to their discussions. The cool evening breeze would carry the scent of the lake and the distant pines, a clean, invigorating aroma. Friedrich felt a profound sense of belonging, a rare and precious connection to a kindred spirit. It was a period of intense intellectual and emotional flourishing, a time when the boundaries between friendship, art, and philosophy seemed to dissolve into a single seamless whole. The shared dream of a cultural rebirth, a revival of the heroic spirit, animated their discussions. They envisioned a world where art was not mere entertainment, but a profound spiritual force, capable of elevating humanity. These were not abstract academic debates. They were living, breathing conversations, fueled by a shared passion that seemed to ignite the very air around them. The resonance of their souls, the deep understanding that passed between them, was almost palpable, even as the shadows lengthened and the distant mountain peaks faded into the twilight. The discussions would continue, fueled by wine and an inexhaustible wellspring of ideas. The villa, with its warm light and soft music, became a kind of ideal republic, a sanctuary for artistic and philosophical endeavor. It was a time of immense hope and creative energy for Friedrich, a period where his own voice began to find its distinct melody, harmonizing with the grander symphony of Wagner's vision. The moments shared in Tripschen, under the watchful gaze of the Alps and the gentle murmur of the lake, were etched into his memory as a golden age, a fleeting, beautiful dream of shared purpose and profound connection. The delicate notes of a piano, drifting out across the still water, seemed to carry the very essence of that brief, brilliant utopia. The delicate harmony of Tripschen could not last. Like a finely tuned instrument, it was susceptible to the subtle shifts of human nature, to the inevitable discord that arises even among the most resonant souls. The dream, so vibrant and full of promise, began to fray at the edges. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the shared vision that had bound Friedrich and Richard together began to diverge, like two streams flowing from the same source, but destined for different seas. The quiet understanding gave way to subtle disagreements, led to deeper philosophical rifts. Friedrich's keen intellect, ever restless, began to question the very foundations of the Wagnerian worldview, perceiving a growing nationalism and a certain theatricality that grated against his own increasingly austere pursuit of truth. The music, once a source of divine inspiration, now sometimes felt overwhelming, too grand, too insistent. The gentle lapping of Lake Lucerne in the distant serene mountains remained, but the inner landscape had shifted. Simultaneously, a more insidious adversary began to manifest itself, the quiet, persistent insurgency of his own body. Headaches, blinding and relentless, became his unwelcome companions. Digestive ailments, a constant gnawing discomfort, began to chip away at his strength. His eyes, once sharp and clear, grew sensitive to light, often blurring the very pages he loved to read. The physical world, once a source of delight, became a source of constant irritation and pain. The cumulative effect of these internal and external pressures led to an inevitable parting of ways. The break with Wagner was not a sudden and dramatic explosion, but a slow, sorrowful drifting apart, a quiet fading of shared light. It was a wound, deep and profound, leaving a hollow ache where once there had been vibrant connection. And with this personal rupture came a professional one. The academic life at the University of Basel, once a secure anchor, began to feel like a heavy chain. The formal lectures, the demands of the institution, the very rhythm of an ordered existence, became unbearable in the face of his escalating health issues and his burgeoning unconventional ideas. In 1879, with a quiet resignation, Friedrich submitted his letter of resignation from his professorship. It was not a gesture of rebellion, but one of necessity, a surrender to the insistent whispers of his own body and the urgent demands of his evolving spirit. He walked away from the security of a stable income, from the intellectual community he had cultivated, from the familiar routines of academic life. He packed his meager belongings into a single simple suitcase, its leather worn smooth by previous journeys. The scene at the Basel train station was understated, almost unremarkable. A chill mist hung in the air, softening the harsh lines of the iron tracks and the distant rumble of arriving trains. The platform was sparsely populated. A few travelers bundled against the morning dampness, their voices hushed. The steam from the locomotives billowed and curled, briefly obscuring figures before dissipating into the vast, indifferent sky. Friedrich stood alone, his small suitcase beside him, a solitary figure against the backdrop of the departing world. There were no grand farewells, no tearful goodbyes. The few friends who knew of his departure understood the quiet gravity of the moment. He boarded the train, a silent passenger among strangers, his face pale, his eyes holding a distant, reflective gaze. The whistle blew, a mournful, drawn-out sound that seemed to echo the quiet ache within him. The train lurched forward, slowly gathering speed, and his figure, framed for a moment in the window, was swallowed by the swirling mist and the accelerating rhythm of the wheels on the tracks. He was disappearing, not just from Basel, but from the conventional world he had known. This departure marked the true beginning of his solitary wanderings, a life stripped down to its bare essentials. He would seek out quiet rooms in pensions and boarding houses across Europe, from the sun-drenched coasts of Italy to the icy peaks of the Engadin. His possessions would remain few: a single room, often sparsely furnished, a simple wooden table by a window, a single lamp for the long hours of night work, the luxury of companionship, the comfort of a fixed address, the noise of bustling city life, thufty. All were shed like old skin. The silence that followed him was not an empty void, but a fertile ground. In the stark simplicity of his new existence, he found a different kind of strength, a quiet resilience. The absence of external distractions, the relentless stripping away of all but the most fundamental necessities, allowed his thoughts to crystallize with an unprecedented clarity. He became an observer, a listener to the subtle murmurs of his own consciousness, unburdened by the expectations of others or the demands of the world. The quiet click of a door closing behind him, the soft rustle of clothing as he sat down at his plain table, the gentle glow of his lamp in the deepening twilight sortie. These were the new rhythms of his life. This radical minimalism, born of necessity and choice, became the crucible in which his most profound ideas would be forged. The world had receded, leaving him in a space of profound, almost absolute quietude. And in that quietude, in the stark, unadorned solitude, a new kind of power was being born, a strength forged in the crucible of detachment and self-reliance. He was learning to listen to the whispers of his own soul, unmediated by any external voice, in the vast empty space that was now his world. This was the quiet, almost invisible, birth of a profound solitude. The air thinned with every upward step, a subtle crispness that sharpened the senses, making the distant world seem both clearer and more remote. Above 6,000 feet in the Engadin Valley, the very act of breathing became a conscious, deliberate rhythm, a slow drawing in of pure, cold sweetness, followed by a gentle release. Nietzsche walked, his boots finding their familiar cadence on the narrow mountain paths. The soft crunch of loose gravel beneath his soles a constant, grounding companion. Each stone, each tiny fragment of rock, contributed to a whispered symphony of ascent, a steady, unwavering beat against the vast silence of the Alps. The path wound its way through meadows, still damp with morning dew, where tiny, resilient wildflowers pushed their vibrant colors through the sparse grasses, their petals holding droplets of melted frost like miniature jewels. He walked past ancient larch trees, their needles a soft, almost ethereal green against the rugged gray of the granite peaks. Their trunks, gnarled and twisted by centuries of wind and snow, stood like silent sentinels, bearing witness to countless dawns and dusks. The scent of pine resin, sharp and invigorating, mingled with the faint, earthy smell of damp soil and the clean, mineral tang of the high altitude. It was a scent that spoke of endurance, of timelessness, of a world stripped bare to its essential, unyielding beauty. The sun, when it finally crested the highest ridges, painted the eastern slopes in hues of gold and rose, slowly chasing away the lingering shadows that clung to the deeper ravines. The air, initially a sharp embrace, gradually softened, warmed by the rising light, yet never losing its invigorating chill. The clouds, ever-present companions in these high altitudes, drifted and reformed with a languid grace. Sometimes they would descend, soft and silent, enveloping him in a cool, damp embrace, reducing the world to a hazy, intimate sphere where only the immediate path and the sound of his own breathing existed. The world would shrink, then expand again as the mists parted, revealing sudden, breathtaking vistas, jagged peaks piercing the impossibly blue sky, deep valleys carved by ancient glaciers, and the shimmering expanse of a distant lake. A sapphire jewel nestled amidst the rugged terrain. These moments of shifting visibility, of revelation and concealment, mirrored the very process of thought, of ideas emerging from the fog of uncertainty, only to be momentarily obscured again. Nietzsche believed that only thoughts walked out were of true value, that the rhythm of the body, the steady, rhythmic exertion, was intrinsically linked to the clarity and profundity of the mind. Each step was a step towards understanding, each breath a deeper immersion into the raw, unfiltered reality of existence. His gait was not hurried, but deliberate, a measured pace that allowed the landscape to unfold around him, to seep into his very being. The muscles in his legs, accustomed to the climb, worked with an effortless efficiency, a quiet strength that felt deeply connected to the earth beneath his feet. The distant rush of a mountain stream, tumbling over ancient rocks, would occasionally break the silence, a constant murmuring voice of the wilderness. He would pause sometimes, leaning against a sun-warmed boulder, closing his eyes to fully absorb the symphony of the mountain. The faint buzz of an insect, the rustle of a tiny lizard in the dry grass, the whisper of the wind through the sparse pines. Each sound was amplified, made distinct by the profound quietude. Then, with a slow, deliberate breath, he would open his eyes, the world reborn in sharper focus, the vast panorama stretching out before him, an endless tapestry of rock and sky. The sheer scale of it all, the immense, indifferent grandeur of the Alps, had a way of shrinking the petty anxieties of human existence, of placing them in their proper minuscule perspective. It was a space where the ego could dissolve, where the individual could merge, however briefly, with the eternal rhythms of nature. The sunlight played across the textures of the mountainside, highlighting the ancient striations in the rock, the subtle shifts in color from deep gray to ochre to a pale, almost silvery white. Patches of snow lingered in the shaded crevices, stubborn remnants of winter, reflecting the light with a dazzling intensity. The air carried the scent of distant snowmelt, a clean, almost sterile aroma that spoke of purity and renewal. As the day progressed, the shadows would lengthen, stretching like long, dark fingers across the valleys, transforming the familiar landscape into something new, something subtly altered by the changing light. The silence deepened with the approaching evening, broken only by the occasional cry of a high-flying bird, a lonely echo against the vastness. His footsteps continued, a steady, reassuring rhythm, a heartbeat against the immensity of the world. The path, sometimes clear and wide, at other times narrow and treacherous, demanded focus, a mindfulness that left no room for distraction. It was a physical meditation, a moving contemplation where the body and mind were in perfect, harmonious alignment. The feeling of the ground beneath his feet, the slight incline or decline, the shifting texture from soft earth to sharp scree. Each sensation was registered, absorbed, becoming part of the larger immersive experience. The wind, when it came, was a cool caress, a gentle reminder of the constant movement of the air currents, the invisible breath of the mountains. He walked as if he were part of the landscape, a temporary extension of the earth itself, his presence as natural and unforced as the growth of the alpine flowers, or the flow of the glacial streams. The distant peaks, perpetually snow-capped, seemed to watch over him, silent and majestic, embodying an ancient wisdom that transcended human understanding. The sky above, a canvas of ever-changing blues and whites, offered an infinite expanse for the mind to wander, to stretch beyond the confines of ordinary thought. This was his sanctuary, his crucible, where ideas were forged not in the heat of debate, but in the cool, clear air of solitude, hammered into shape by the steady rhythm of his steps. The long shadows of the evening began to creep up the slopes, painting the world in shades of indigo and violet, preparing the way for the quiet descent of night. The path eventually led him back down, the air growing denser, warmer, the sense of the valley floor returning with a comforting familiarity. The sounds of human habitation, faint and distant, began to emerge from the deepening twilight thovened. The distant lowing of cattle, the soft chime of a church bell. Yet, the profound stillness of the high mountains lingered within him, a deep reservoir of calm that would sustain him long after his boots had left the trail. Each step on the descent was a gentle release, a slow unraveling of the day's exertions, leaving behind only the quiet satisfaction of a mind stretched and clarified, a spirit renewed by the elemental grandeur of the Alps. The rhythm of his walk, once a steady ascent, now became a flowing descent, a graceful return to the world below, carrying with it the silent wisdom of the peaks. The autumn leaves in the Tottenberg forest had begun their slow, melancholic descent, each one a tiny, fragile vessel, carrying the last vestiges of summer's warmth. They drifted silently from the branches, spiraling gently through the still air before settling softly onto the forest floor, creating a thick, rustling carpet of gold, crimson, and deep russet. The air was cool, carrying the sharp, sweet scent of decay, of damp earth and decaying wood, a perfume unique to this season of letting go. Nietzsche sat on a fallen log, its surface rough and cool beneath his hand, covered in a delicate tapestry of moss and lichen. It was an ancient log, slowly returning to the earth from which it had sprung, its presence a quiet testament to the cycles of life and dissolution. The forest around him was hushed, a profound silence broken only by the gentle whisper of the wind through the bare branches high above, a sound like distant sighing. Occasionally, a single leaf would detach itself and flutter down, its soft landing barely audible. The sunlight filtered through the thinning canopy, cast long, shifting patterns of light and shadow on the forest floor, creating an intricate, ever-changing mosaic. It was a light that held a certain wistfulness, a golden glow that hinted at warmth but offered only a cool embrace. The trees stood tall and still, their trunks dark and textured, their branches reaching up like skeletal fingers against the pale autumn sky. He watched the sun slowly dip towards the horizon, its last rays painting the western sky in fiery oranges and purples, bleeding into the soft approaching twilight. The colors of the sunset were reflected in the puddles of rainwater that dotted the forest path, turning their surfaces into shimmering mirrors. The chill in the air deepened as the light faded, urging the forest creatures deeper into their burrows, leaving the stillness undisturbed. A distant bird call, high and lonely, echoed briefly through the trees, then was swallowed by the encroaching quiet. His gaze was steady, unblinking, fixed on the vanishing light, a silent witness to the earth's slow turning. There were no dramatic gestures, no outbursts of sorrow or anger, only a profound, almost stoic stillness, the weight of unfulfilled affection. The delicate threads of connection that had frayed and snapped manifested not as a storm, but as a deep, pervasive calm. It was the calm that follows a storm, when the air is cleared and the world stands exposed in its raw, unadorned truth. He understood, in this deep silence, that certain paths were meant to be walked alone, that some truths could only be discovered in the wilderness of solitude. The forest, ancient and indifferent, offered no judgment, only space for reflection, a vast, green cathedral for the soul. The rustle of the leaves beneath his feet as he had walked deeper into the woods had been a soft, murmuring conversation, each step a further detachment from the world of human entanglement. Now, sitting motionless, he felt the cool breath of the forest against his skin, a cleansing touch that seemed to strip away the layers of expectation and desire. The scent of decaying leaves became stronger, a rich, earthy aroma that spoke of transformation, of life returning to its source. It was a comforting scent, a reminder that even in endings, there was a profound sense of continuity. He traced the rough grain of the log with his finger, feeling the texture of time, the slow, relentless work of nature. The silence was not empty, but full of the quiet hum of the forest, the unseen life teeming beneath the surface, the slow, imperceptible growth and decay. It was a silence that invited introspection, that allowed thoughts to unfurl and settle like the leaves around him. The heartache was present, a dull ache beneath the surface, but it was transmuted by the vastness of his surroundings, absorbed into the larger rhythm of existence. It became a part of the landscape, a leaf among countless leaves, destined to return to the earth. The last sliver of the sun vanished, leaving behind a sky of bruised purples and deep indigos. The first stars began to prick through the fading light, tiny pinpricks of distant fire. The air grew colder still, urging him to pull his coat tighter. Yet he remained, rooted to the log, a solitary figure against the deepening twilight. The forest, once a place of vibrant green, was now a symphony of muted browns and grays, preparing for the long slumber of winter. The falling leaves, once a symbol of loss, now seemed to represent a profound letting go, an acceptance of what must be. In this deep, profound quietude, the realization settled upon him with the weight of ancient stone. Great ideas, truly profound insights, could not be born in the comfortable warmth of companionship or the easy flow of shared understanding. They required the stark, uncompromising landscape of solitude, the crucible of self-reliance, where the mind was forced to confront its deepest questions without the solace of external validation. The forest, with its silent strength, and its unwavering cycles mirrored this truth. It stood alone, rooted, yet constantly transforming, shedding, and renewing, a testament to the power of enduring through all seasons. He listened to the silence, not as an absence, but as a presence, a deep, resonant hum that filled the space between the trees. The rustling of a small animal in the underbrush, the gentle drip of moisture from a branch savandee. These tiny sounds became magnified, each one a distinct note in the forest's nocturnal symphony. The acceptance of loss, the embrace of solitude, was not a surrender to despair, but a quiet, powerful affirmation of his own path. It was a tragic serenity, yes, but also a profound liberation, a stripping away of all that was not essential, leaving behind only the raw, unyielding core of his being. The night deepened, the stars grew brighter, and the forest settled into its long, silent vigil, a silent witness to the quiet forging of a soul. It was in the high, crystalline air of Sils Maria, near a colossal pyramid, shaped boulder that seemed to have been placed there by the gods themselves, that the grandest revelation descended upon him. The rock, ancient and immense, rose from the earth with a quiet authority, its weathered surfaces bearing the marks of millennia of wind and ice. The sunlight, when it struck this monumental stone, seemed to imbue it with an inner glow, a silent power that resonated with the very core of the earth. Around it, the Engadin Valley stretched out in a breathtaking panorama of rugged peaks, shimmering lakes, and vast open skies. He stood before it, a solitary figure dwarfed by its immensity, the thin, clear air filling his lungs with a profound sense of presence. The world around him felt vast, boundless, yet intimately connected. Above, the sky stretched into an infinite deep blue, a silent witness to the dance of distant galaxies, their spiral arms slowly turning in an endless cosmic waltz. Each star, a sun in its own right, burned with an ancient fire, its light traveling across unimaginable distances to reach this tiny point on Earth. The feeling was one of being suspended in the grand, indifferent machinery of the universe, yet also profoundly at home within its ceaseless motion. Below, the earth itself breathed in an eternal rhythm. The seasons turned with an unwavering predictability, winter's hushed blanket of snow yielding to the vibrant green explosion of spring, then the golden warmth of summer, and finally the fiery, melancholic beauty of autumn. Each year the cycle repeated, a grand terrestrial ballet of birth, growth, decay, and renewal. The mountains, ancient and enduring, stood sentinel, shaped by the slow, relentless grind of glaciers, their peaks worn down over eons, only to be lifted again by the earth's deep, unseen forces. The distant sound of the lake, a gentle lapping of waves against the shore, was a constant, murmuring voice in the valley. The water, clear and cold, flowed into rivers, then into vast oceans, only to evaporate and return as rain, falling back onto the mountains, feeding the streams, replenishing the lakes, a liquid circle without beginning or end. The waves themselves, each one rising and falling, cresting and breaking, were an echo of this larger rhythm, an infinite series of repetitions, each wave unique, yet fundamentally the same. A whisper began to form, not from the wind, but from within, a voice that was both ancient and deeply familiar, low and resonant, like the deep hum of the earth itself. It was the voice of Zarathustra, the prophet, speaking not of new beginnings, but of eternal returns. He spoke of the world as a great ring, a vast cosmic circle, where everything that has ever happened, everything that is happening, and everything that ever will happen is destined to repeat, infinitely, eternally. Listen closely, the whisper seemed to say, to the rustle of the leaves, to the murmur of the stream, to the beating of your own heart. All these sounds, these moments, these fleeting sensations, they have occurred before, and they will occur again. The same sun will rise, casting the same long shadows. The same wind will sigh through the same trees. The same thoughts, the same joys, the same sorrows will unfold again and again and again across the vast, unending expanse of time. Imagine, the whisper continued, the grains of sand on a vast beach. Each grain a moment, a choice, a feeling. And imagine, beyond that beach, an infinite number of identical beaches, stretching into an endless horizon. Every grain perfectly replicated, every moment perfectly relived. The world is not a line, moving ever forward into oblivion. It is a circle, a great magnificent wheel, turning, turning, always bringing back what has been, always bringing back what is to come. Do not fear this repetition, the soft voice urged. Do not shrink from its vastness. For in this eternal return lies not a crushing burden, but a profound liberation. If every moment is to be lived again infinitely, then every moment becomes sacred. Every choice carries the weight of eternity. Every breath, every thought, every feeling is not merely fleeting, but an enduring truth destined to recur. The stars above seem to pulse with this understanding, their silent light echoing the eternal dance. The mountains, so steadfast, so seemingly unmoving, were themselves part of this colossal rotation, slowly shifting, slowly eroding, only to be reborn in new forms, new arrangements, across the eons. The very air he breathed, the atoms that composed his body had existed before, in countless forms, and would exist again in countless more. This is the greatest affirmation, the whisper concluded, the ultimate embrace of life. To love this fate, this eternal cycle, this endless return of all things. To say yes to every moment, knowing it will return. To find joy not in novelty, but in the profound, unwavering constancy of existence. For the world is a circle, and within its perfect, unbroken form, there is a deep, abiding peace. A peace that transcends all fleeting concerns, all temporary struggles. The sound of the wind rising gently seemed to carry this message across the valley, a soft resonant hum that filled the vastness. It was a lullaby of the cosmos, a whispered secret from the heart of the universe. The pyramid-shaped rock stood silent, an anchor in the swirling currents of time, a monument to the eternal truth. And in the acceptance of this grand cyclical vision, there was a profound sense of belonging, a feeling of being utterly, completely at home within the endless, repetitive rhythm of the world. The world is a circle. Breathe in, breathe out. It all returns, it all returns. And in that return, there is an ultimate, unshakable calm. The sun in turn, a city of wide, elegant boulevards and grand piazzas, felt different. It was an autumn sun, not harsh or burning, but a soft golden light that seemed to infuse the very air with a sense of gentle warmth. It spilled over the rooftops, painted the ochre facades of the buildings, and lay in long, tranquil stripes across the cobblestone streets. Nietzsche, having journeyed from the stark, bracing altitudes of the Engadin, found himself embraced by this luminous, almost liquid gold. The city itself seemed to breathe with a calm, expansive rhythm, a stark contrast to the often turbulent inner landscapes he had navigated. He walked these wide streets, his footsteps echoing softly, not with the hurried pace of a man driven by urgency, but with the deliberate, unburdened gait of someone who had found a kind of profound, transparent tranquility. He would settle into a quiet corner of a cafe, or find a bench in one of the sun-drenched squares and simply observe. The world unfolded before him with a clarity he hadn't known before. The faces passing by, the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze, the distant murmur of voices tea-by, all seemed to resonate with a singular, unifying harmony. It was here, in this golden light, that his pen flowed with an astonishing ease. Letters to friends, brimming with an almost childlike joy, spoke of his newfound serenity, his intellectual fervor, and the burgeoning insights that seemed to bloom effortlessly from within him. He was at the zenith of his creative powers, ideas cascading onto paper with a vibrant energy that was both exhilarating and deeply peaceful. There was no struggle, no torment, only a confident, almost playful dance of thought. This was the time of amor fati, the love of one's fate. Not a passive resignation, but an active, joyous affirmation of every single moment, every joy and every sorrow, every ascent and every descent, as an indispensable part of the grand tapestry of existence. To say yes to life, to embrace its entirety, its beauty and its terror, its light and its shadow with an open heart. This realization, like the warm Turin sun, spread through his being, melting away any lingering tension, any knot of resistance. His muscles, often taut from years of intellectual strain and physical discomfort, began to yield, to soften, to release their grip. A deep, pervasive sense of ease settled over him, a quiet assurance that all was as it should be, and that in this acceptance lay the truest form of freedom. The air itself seemed to carry this message, a gentle whisper that invited every fiber of one's being to simply let go, to float in the benevolent current of what is. But even the most radiant clarity can precede a profound stillness. The golden light of Turin, so full of affirmation, was soon to give way to a different kind of illumination. 40, the dim, internal glow of a soul in repose. It was in one of Turin's bustling piazzas, under that same autumn sky, that a moment unfolded which would forever mark the boundary between his active philosophical life and the long, quiet twilight that followed. A carriage horse, its spirit broken, its body weary from endless toil, collapsed in the street, subjected to the harsh, indifferent whip of its owner. Nietzsche, witnessing this raw, brutal display of suffering, stepped forward from the crowd. He approached the fallen animal, his heart overflowing with a pain that transcended mere sympathy. He wrapped his arms around the horse's neck, pressing his face into its coarse mane, murmuring words of comfort, a silent lament for all the suffering of the world. It was an act of profound, wordless empathy, a final, desperate embrace of life's vulnerable essence. And then, a door within him seemed to close. He was led away, gently, from the square, and from that day forward, the torrent of words, the cascade of ideas, the relentless questioning that had defined his existence, gradually receded into an immense silence. It was not a silence of emptiness, but rather a deep, restorative pause, a long, well-deserved rest for a soul that had wrestled with the cosmos. For the next decade, a silent, unmoving figure would often be seen seated on a balcony in his quiet room, or later, in the peaceful confines of his family home. He would gaze out at the world, his eyes still holding a profound depth, but his lips unmoving. The seasons turned outside his window. He watched the falling leaves drift down from the trees, a slow, gentle descent that mirrored the gradual closing of his own active mind. The wind, a constant companion, would rustle through his now white hair, a soft, whispering sound that filled the quiet air, a gentle symphony of nature's indifference and eternal cycle. There were no more arguments to win, no more truths to unearth, no more battles to fight, only the quiet observation, the deep, undisturbed stillness of a long 10-year twilight. In this profound quietude, the mind is invited to surrender, to let go of every thought, every worry, every fleeting image that dances across the inner screen, to simply be present with the soft rustle of unseen leaves, the gentle caress of an imagined breeze, to feel the weight of the body settling, growing heavier, softer, sinking deeper into the comfort of rest. The consciousness, like the distant, fading light of a long day, begins to diffuse, to empty itself of all content. There is only the quiet breath, the gentle rhythm of the heart, and the vast, peaceful expanse of nothingness. A deep, deep stillness, inviting a peaceful descent into the softest slumber. The journey finally led back to the beginning, to Recken, the small Saxon town where the young Friedrich had first learned the quiet cadences of life, surrounded by the echoes of his father's organ music and the solemnity of ancient texts. It was there, beneath the familiar earth, that his body was laid to rest, beside the father whose memory had remained a guiding star throughout his tumultuous intellectual odyssey. The village church stood as it always had, a silent sentinel watching over the graves. On warm summer nights, the sky above Recken would unfurl, a tapestry of countless stars, brilliant diamonds scattered across a velvet expanse. These were the same stars he had gazed upon as a boy, the same celestial bodies that had wheeled above the mountains of the Engadin and shone down on the golden piazzas of Turin. Now they seemed to stand guard over his final resting place, a quiet witness to a life lived with an intensity that few could comprehend. For, ivy green and tenacious, began its slow, patient climb over the weathered stone of his gravestone, a soft, living embrace of the earth reclaiming its own. His physical form, so often racked with pain, so often a vessel for restless thought, had at last returned to the dust from which it came. But the words, those powerful, often unsettling, always profound words that had poured forth from his soul, did not vanish. They transformed. They became the whisper of the wind through the ancient trees of the forest, carrying echoes of his fierce questioning and his joyous affirmation. They became the distant, twinkling light of the night sky, each star a silent testament to an idea, a challenge, a profound insight that continued to illuminate the human spirit. All the climbing is now finished. The arduous ascent of the intellect, the solitary traverses of the spirit, the endless striving for new heights of understanding forward, all have reached their peaceful conclusion. There is no more need to strive, no more need to search, no more need to question. The long journey has ended, and the traveler has come home. Now only rest remains. A deep, restorative rest, nestled in the gentle embrace of the silent mountains, under the watchful, ancient gaze of the stars. Let the weight of the world and the weight of your own thoughts simply dissolve. Allow your breath to deepen, to lengthen, to soften, like the slow, steady rhythm of the earth itself. Feel the profound peace that settles upon you. A quiet assurance that all is well, all is resolved, all is eternal. May your spirit find its sanctuary in this quiet night. May your mind be clear and untroubled. May you drift softly, effortlessly, into the deepest, most peaceful slumber, returning for a time to the vast, timeless ocean of eternity. Sleep now, sleep deeply.